So we'll start inside of InDesign. I'll go to File and choose Open. And then from our Cover Art folder, choose L, IDML, choose Open. And we're going to, in this scenario, Photoshop out the background from the left arm as we view it here, and then have that portion conceal part of the masthead. So to do that, well, we can left click and select that image, right click with a cursor, go down the list, and there's an option there called Edit Original. Now, if JPEG files, which this image is, are set up to be open inside of Photoshop, when you click on that, as if by magic, it opens up in Adobe Photoshop. So just making sure that under the View menu, I have my rulers turned on, just so that I can show you here on screen. We're really going to click and hold down the mouse and drag and pull out a guide that's going to start just to the left of this lady's arm, and then drag another one out, and it's going to stop just short of her ear. And then from the top ruler, click and hold down the mouse and drag another one down. And I'd say down to the bottom of the neck in there, because this region here is where we're going to be doing all the Photoshop. There's no point doing any other additional work beyond that area because it will be wasted, to be frank. So what I'll do is I'm going to go to the second tool down, and that will be my rectangular marquee tool. Make sure the mode is set to new, feather set to 0, style set to normal, and then hover just off the edge of the canvas in here. Click and hold down the mouse and drag out and draw selection like so. Let go of the mouse. With that selection in place, I'll head up to Layer, New, Layer via Copy, which will create an exact duplicate of that selected content in a layer of its own in exactly the same place. Ready for us to start masking it out. And then I'm going to hide the background layer. And just for now, well, I'm going to go down to View and choose Show. I'm going to hide the guides. We don't need them now. I'm going to zoom in just by using my scroll wheel on the mouse. And then the fourth tool down, the Object Selection tool, that could also be the Magic Wand tool. And then you'll find that there's a button in there called Select Subject. And if you left click on that, it will select, if you're lucky, the majority of it. I have found with this image that it does just miss the top of this lady's arm in here. So we'll have to do a little bit of manual selecting. That's no problem. It's easily solved. So if I zoom in and then just center that area on screen, I'm going to switch to my magnetic lasso tool, making sure the mode is set to Add to Selection, feather set to 0, anti-alias turned on. And in here, I'm going to leave the options as they are. They've got nice clear contrast. And then I'm going to hover my cursor over the edge just before it goes wrong, and then left click and let go of the mouse, and then glide my cursor along the edge of the arm in here, just being very steady, and then all the way along to the edge of the visible layer. You can go beyond the edge of the visible layers as well if you wish, but I'm going to go down here underneath the portion that's missing, round, and then back to the start. And then when you find the cursor changes back into the icon of that tool, you can left click and it'll add it to the selection. So just zooming out, touching here, just make sure we've got everything we need. We appear to have in there, which is good. And then the next thing we'll do then, as long as you have any selection tool active in Photoshop, you should find a button at the top called Select and Mask. And if you click on that, it will take you into the Select and Mask dialog box. Now, it may not look like this, and certainly if you weren't following one of the earlier masking exercises, you might find a little bit of tweaking to do in here. So when you come into the dialog box, we need to see a nice clear view of the area that we are going to conceal. Now, mine's highlighted in green. It's pretty an obnoxious luminous green. So when you come to this dialog box, the first thing to do is head up to the View thumbnail, click on that, and just make sure that you are using the overlay preview mode. And then I'll click outside of there. Under opacity, well, this is usually set to about 50%, which I don't find very useful. So I always just dial that right up to 100. And to define the appearance, click in the color chip next to the word color. And as providing you click in the saturation box at the top right hand side, that will give you a very vivid hue. Just, of course, make sure that it's very contrasting from the subject, and then click OK. and then going to turn on the Smart Radius checkbox. This will look for edges, and it will try and enhance the edge of our selection, because that is all that we're really doing in here. We're just trying to improve the current selection. Now that will not account for the hair. So that's the thing that we need to get right first. So I'm going to go across to the tools on the left-hand side and then hover over the Refine Edge brush. This is built for fine details like hair. So if I left click on that, and then just make sure my brush size is quite big. At the moment it's set to 10. So click in the little drop down menu, increase the size of that and just hover outside. You don't want this to be too big. So yeah, for this image, about 40 pixels will be about right. And then I'll hit the return key to make that pop-up disappear. And then what we need to do is zoom in much closer. And then we need to work from the green area into the hair. So try wherever possible not to drag with this tool over the thick clumps of hair. This is really kind of a hair edge detecting tool. It's going to try and remove any colors that don't match the hair. So starting from around about here, I'll click and hold down the mouse and drag over the edges like that. And then just come back down here, work around, and then let go. You see it starts to draw some of the hair back in. Now you notice there is some background color in here. So again, I'm just going to have to click into those areas. Just try and get Photoshop to remove those. Just to click in here and in there. And along that edge in there as well. And then I'm going to reduce the size of my brush, which you can do by tapping the left or the right square bracket key. That will make the brush size smaller or bigger. So if I tap the left square bracket key next to the P key on the keyboard a couple of times, just to make it smaller, and just drag in that region there and here. We don't want any of that color to show through because it will stand out. And then maybe just a couple of clicks in here. And that should be good for now. Down at the bottom here, I can make my brush size a little bit bigger and then drag across the hair. Here and down there. Like so. Just making sure we haven't got any of that background color in. Great. So in terms of the hair, that's looking much better now. I'm going to zoom out a touch. And then we need to do a little bit of repairing in here. So the next tool down is called the brush tool. And I want to leave the mode set to add. And then I'm going to increase the brush size a little bit in here, maybe up to around about 50. Press return. I'm going to hover over these regions here because they have been, well, eliminated. So we don't want her arm to disappear in any way. So hold down the spacebar to pan, drag along these areas here just to make sure they haven't been missed. Might need to just zoom in. We don't want any kind of detail of the edge of the arm being lost. That will not be good. We want to get a nice, clean, masked edge in here. Work around the top of the arm. Just make sure all of that looks nice and smooth. Across there. And that's looking much better. Just put the solid portion of the arm back in there as well. So, zoom out a little bit. And then from here, well, it's always worthwhile at that point, just clicking back on your view menu and then hovering over and clicking on black and white. Because this is where you'll really get a sense of what the other options are doing. I'll click outside of that field. And then we don't need to work with anything like smooth or feather. But in terms of contrast, we do need a little bit of contrast in here. So if I just drag that up, I don't tend to increase this above 10% in here, just to get a bit more contrast. And then shift edges will allow you to shrink your selection ever so slightly in here. So 10% should be enough. And then with that done, well, I'll go back up to the top, choose overlay, and I think we're looking good at that. That's a good masking job there. So click away from there, go down to the bottom. Notice that under output 2, it's set to selection. So we're just going to get an enhanced selection in here and then click OK, which of course appears on screen. Make sure that your masked layer is still active. Go down to the bottom, click on the masking icon, always shown as a circle inside of a square, and it then applies the layer mask, of course, and hides the background content. Now we have 2 hard edges along here on the left and the bottom. That sometimes can create issues in print. And the telltale sign of that is we'll see lines appear inside of InDesign when it's in the layout. So I'm going to leave it in here, and if it does pop up and becomes a problem, I'll show you how to tackle that. But from here, well, we're pretty much done. Go to File and then choose Save, and it will prompt me to save this as a PSD, and it already puts the .psd format in there. I'm in my links folder, so all should be good in here. Photoshop, layers are still turned on, and then click on save. So if I head back to InDesign now, we can swap these images out. So with it still selected, I'm going to click on the links panel here to make sure it's visible. And then I'm going to choose to relink. And then back in my links folder in here, I'm going to choose L01, show input options turned on, and then click on open. Now I'm going to make sure that the masked layer is turned off, and I'm going to turn on the visibility for the background layer, and then click OK. So you can see nothing's changed whatsoever, and it wouldn't do until that is I go to edit and then choose copy, edit, and then paste in place. You'll notice it's added it right at the top in here. So that compound path is our masthead, which cannot be visible anymore because it's lower down in the list than the photograph, the copy that is of our PSD. And so from here then, what I'll do is go to Object, Object Layer Options, and then turn on the masked layer, but turn off the background, and then click OK. And that now gives us the effect of her arm being in front of part of the L, but the rest of the masthead is visible. Just makes it, more dynamic, more visually interesting. So here's that thing I was talking about earlier. The line on screen. When you view anything on your desktop at 100% or greater, if the line still exists, that could be problematic in print and the output. So this will just require us to dip back into Photoshop and soften those two edges. Making sure that you left click in the layer mask, of course the black and white thumbnail in here. Switch to your brush tool by tapping the B key on the keyboard. And then black needs to be the foreground color that we're going to paint with. Black conceals, white reveals. And then up at the top, possibly a little bit too big. So I'm just going to drop this down in size to about 20. Press return. Make sure that opacity is set to 100 and then hover your cursor right on the edge. Left click and let go. Hold down the shift key and shift and left click at the very bottom to then mask out a soft edge in there. And again, go to the other side, shift and left click to smooth out that bottom edge. It's just something that can happen, but that's the best way to tackle it. Again, don't forget to go to File, choose Save, and then we'll head back to InDesign. And you'll notice that on returning back to InDesign, it hasn't changed, and that's because we need to update the graphics. So if you hover your cursor over the warning symbol in the links panel and double left click on that badge, it will update. So you notice now that that line has disappeared. So if I go back to Fit on Screen and press Shift and W, there we go. That's our finished Photoshop front cover for L. Don't forget, if this is the first time you've opened up this document, do go to File and choose to save this as an InDesign document. We will pick this document back up in a later chapter.